different than yours. I actually have Jokic number one.
Mm.
Jokic number one. I have Giannis number two, and then I actually have Embiid third, which I
Ooh.
think is crazy because I actually think I like Embiid more than you. Like overall, I've always been a little higher on Embiid than you
Mm-hmm.
have. That being said, I actually kind of I would disagree with you. Like I think Jokic is working with the least out of these three guys, which I think is really going to be the deciding factor of this vote. Like I actually find it kind of strange that he's dropped down a little bit. The
Mm-hmm.
only reason I think he might not win is if they lose tonight, they go one game
Mm-hmm.
below Minnesota and they're in the play-in. If they're in the play-in, he cannot possibly win the award. He really just can't. Like
Yeah.
it's not good enough. But that being said, like his team has been really hobbled the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when he had Michael Porter Jr., Michael Porter Jr. was hurt. He really was. And Jamal Murray, we haven't seen in almost 2 years. Uh, I mean, his second best player for a large stretch of the season, is up between Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, or
Mm-hmm.
rookie Bones Highland. So when you stop and you look at that, like Embiid has a lot better supporting cast than that with him. Even without Ben Simmons for the first half of the season, he did have Seth Curry. He did
Mm-hmm.
have, Andre Drummond and Tyrese Maxey, who's been lights out, like I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. Um, the problem with Embiid and the reason why he's dropped to three for me is just because this situation with Harden is so ugly, man. Like it's so ugly to watch them play together. And it's not Embiid's fault in the slightest, but it
Mm-hmm.
does have to come into effect. Like
Mm-hmm.
Jokic, the thing with Jokic is that he elevates every player he plays with. Like he makes them the best version of themselves possible in a very
Mm-hmm.
similar way to what LeBron was doing in like the late 2000s, right? With
Yeah.
those dog water Cavs teams with Boobie Gibson and what's his name? Mo Williams, like you have like Mo Williams is his second best player going into the
Right.
finals, right? Like to me, there's no comparison between the supporting cast of Jokic with those
Yeah.
other two guys. Like even Embiid's is so much better. I just find it really like the thing with the Sixers. My biggest problem with the Sixers right now is
Doc
it
Rivers.
has that. Well, Doc Rivers just being Doc Rivers, like
Yeah.
constantly can't help himself. But
Yeah.
still, the chemistry has got to come into effect. Like that has got to count for something, And
Yeah.
it's not Embiid's fault. But now we're running into a situation where, and this could totally be like, and I would argue that it is very not any of the Sixers' fault other than Doc Rivers, maybe. But
James
it
Harden, I
went
would
from
blame.
Ben Simmons to James Harden,
Yeah.
like two of the biggest complainers in the NBA, period.
Yep.
So it's a tough balancing act for sure, but Jokic just does so much on the court, man. He
Yeah.
really does. And if we're looking like on a single player impacting their team night in, night out, I think the Sixers without Embiid would win a lot more games than the Nuggets without Jokic. The Nuggets without Jokic they're the worst team in the league.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
This
This
Nuggets team,
this Nuggets team, okay.
not counting Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Like if they had Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray without Jokic, sure, we're talking a different thing. But those guys aren't playing, right? So it's Jokic and the guys that are there and on the bench, and those dudes are not to the same level, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the
Not
only
as
thing
the Sixers.
I think the only thing I would disagree with you is that like Joel Embiid offensively is just like obvious. That's kind of like the whole thing is like the team is built around him, and same thing with the Nuggets, right? Built around Jokic, but in a different sense, right? Jokic is more of the point
Mm-hmm.
forward, gonna be the person that really has the ball around him, gonna be doing different things with it, and then you have like Embiid, who's primarily the scorer. He's the first option on the team, whereas Jokic and the style they play. And it all depends on the style of play that the reporters and people voting for the MVP are going to like. Like, do they like
Yeah.
they like the idea of Jokic being like an all around player, even if it means that he's not scoring as much, or do they like Joel Embiid, who's like a force of nature, like he's unstoppable when he's in the post? And really, I think these last couple games are really going to determine whether or not I think, in my opinion, Joel Embiid keeps his MVP. Because I think what I've noticed is that the obviously we talked about it with Doc Rivers, right? Saying things about James Harden. If I can have the story here, let me see here. Yeah, so he blames the Doc Rivers said I thought offensively we just stood around, attributed the lack of bench scoring more to Harden and how he play the offense. Some full quotes. So what did he say here? He said, let me see if I can find this quote.
Wasn't it just like it's less on the bench than it is James? I
Yeah,
think it's something like he
yeah,
said.
bench unit struggled. Well, they didn't struggle. They didn't get a lot of shots in their defense. I think that stretch it was more of James Harden than them. So yeah, it was a tough night. And like you said, like he just can't seem to
He just
what
can't
you call
help
it. It
himself.
just can't help himself saying things that he shouldn't be saying, and it just like leads to just like awkward tensions. And like as much as I want to like be frustrated with, I would say like Ben Simmons for what he did. Like I can't blame him for all the stuff that's been going on when literally you have Doc Rivers just absolutely just saying dumb stuff on TV. And again, he probably
Yeah.
shouldn't have said that to Ben Simmons, and again, he shouldn't have said this to James Harden. But uh, I think like that we're gonna see. Like I think they're winning right now, playing against. If I'm not mistaken, they are playing the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah, they won 144 to 114. And let me just take a
Yeah.
look at the box score really quick and just make sure like what he had. I think actually, yeah, Joel Embiid had 29 points tonight, 14 rebounds, like 6 assists. Like I think like and James Harden played okay, but I think it's really gonna determine of like what James Harden are you getting when you are out there for the for the for the 76ers.
Most
Because
definitely. Yeah.
and if you're getting the James Harden that's helping you out and doing everything, like I just feel like the James Harden of the Houston Rockets is done. Like he's not doing that anymore. He's not scoring 29 to 20 like 30 points a game every single night. I think he's probably happy and content with like 21 but like 12 assists. I think that's the James Harden we're now seeing. And so I think if James Harden scales back his offensive game and lets Embiid kind of do everything to get it going, even though I think it makes more sense for James Harden to get going and then have Embiid kind of feast off of that. I think it's Embiid's to keep. I mean, unless they're like going on a huge losing streak, then I think Embiid's got it.
Yeah. So here's a couple points. So with Doc Rivers, I think his biggest problem is that he's just not consistent enough. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's number one, right? Like there's a great example of hard coaching in the NBA this season, and it's from your Boston Celtics. Ime Udoka, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was so hard on your team for the first half of the season. He would call them out after games, he would tell them they were weak, tell them they're playing too soft, and he would not hold back. And I saw lots of Celtics fans complaining incessantly. Like, why are you calling these guys out? Fire this guy. You're not making them want to play for you. All these things, right? And look at what's happened. Like, the Celtics are probably one of the mentally toughest teams in the
Mm-hmm.
league right now.
Yeah.
They really have changed because the criticism he gave them was consistent, concise, and accurate. Like, he wasn't just saying it just to say it. And I'm not saying that's what Doc Rivers is doing. But the difference is that Doc Rivers only does that when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to be criticizing people when things go wrong. But like after one single game, it's kind of tough. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
one thing I would say is that if you look at the box score from tonight, and I have to go back, I actually want to watch the Sixers blowout of Charlotte just to see like they rebounded in a big way. But that being said, James Harden shot the ball a lot less today than he did in that game. I think he had
10
like
shots, I think.
five less. I think he had
It,
five less 3-point shots just in this game. He only shot 10 times, which for James Harden is very low. So who knows? Maybe this is the kind of thing that James Harden just hasn't had. Like nobody was calling him out with Brooklyn until he left, and then they were all ready to say something to him.
yeah.
So maybe. But the biggest thing with Harden is that, like, when you watch him, and like you said, compared to Houston, he is athletically not the same guy.
No.
Whether that's the chicken wings and late nights or what, physically, he's just not the same guy. He can't get by people with that first step like he used to. Like he can't go into the isolation type ball that he used to play every night and beat every individual matchup he was getting. He cannot do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, like I still have faith in I still think the Sixers are like in the top 4 or 5 teams that have a good chance to win the title. Um, and that being primarily due to the fact that this is kind of a Russell Westbrook Lakers situation. Like if Russell Westbrook can facilitate the way he needs to or change the way he plays to facilitate what they need for them to win,
Mm-hmm.
that team would have been a lot better. But Russell Westbrook did not change, and he refused to change the whole
Yeah.
season. The problem for the Sixers is that they don't have a lot of time left. But if they get the James Harden that was playing point guard basically for the Nets last season once Kyrie was injured, right?
Right.
I think they have a legitimate shot because
Mm-hmm.
James Harden shooting 10 times a game and letting Maxey and Embiid and Tobias Harris go in and get these buckets for them, right? That team is really hard to stop defensively. They have so much size.
Yeah.
And realistically, unless like problem with Harden is he's not fast, but Maxey is one of the quickest guys in the league. So they're so
Mm-hmm.
dynamic with all the threats they have. So I like this team a lot, if not for Doc Rivers constantly blaming people like right after games when he
Yeah.
just should realize like let's just have a conversation with this guy. You know, I the fact he didn't learn his lesson and he did it again was such a risky play. I can't believe it kind of worked and they blew out a team today, but we'll see how it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. And Sean, let's read your comments really quick. MVP equals Brandon Clark. The Grizzlies are 33-4 when he scores double digits.
That let's talk about the Grizzlies briefly.
Yeah.
Because he did ask, and I think Sean obviously being a little facetious here, asking are the Grizz better with Ja Morant? I think the answer is obviously no, but I do think it speaks to how well oiled of a machine they are, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you see the difference with a lot of these teams. As soon as their best player goes out, they have to change the style of play to suit their other guys, but the Grizzlies just don't play that way. Like they play the way they're going to play regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like my favorite thing about the Grizzlies this season, one of my favorite league pass teams, like by far, I know I'm not alone with that. They You can tell how much they care about each other. They like and want to root for each other. And I think like when you have all your best players, even if they're injured and not playing and they're all there celebrating with you, like the camaraderie is just different.
Yeah.
You look at these teams like I mean, look at Philly with their different situations, right? And I know it's a
Mm-hmm.
little different with like Ben Simmons, but you can't develop the same type of brotherhood and will to win even the tough games if you don't have that type of emotional connection to each other, you know? And I think there's a lot of people that say that sounds corny, but like that's a huge part of basketball is how close you are with your guys, how much you believe in each other, who's taking shots when who do you believe in to make a shot. The
Right.
thing with the Grizzlies, they all believe they can make shots. They all believe they can make shots. That's why you have Desmond Bain hitting winning shots like on a bunch of different nights this season. You have Aaron Jackson Jr., his arguably defensive player of the year. He might be my pick, if not for Marcus Smart.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then
I love the Grizzlies. What's Sean say?
Sean said, "Here's what I say, Peter or Pete. The Grizzlies have a higher ceiling, but also a lower floor with John Morant on the floor."
Yeah, definitely. And I like if Ja didn't miss so many games this season, he would definitely still be in the MVP discussion. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that hurts his MVP case too. It's kind of a similar situation to who was I mentioning that with earlier? There's too many guys. The Phoenix Suns.
Phoenix
It's just
Suns.
like the team is just so well oiled together to work as a unit that
Mm-hmm.
it's bigger than one player. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching a little bit here and there of the Memphis Grizzlies. Ever since they had like this kind of hot streak and like they were still being competitive. And I remember last year that I think they were in the playing game if I'm not mistaken. And then
Yeah, they beat the
it,
Warriors.
and then this year, yep, you're right, they did beat the Warriors. And then this year, they're improving each and every year. So you're seeing players like Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant and Steven Adams, who, everyone was like, wow, I don't know about Steven Adams. I'm not sure why they would add him. I think, Sean, you even said it when we were talking about it, like, why did they add him? But I just
But
think,
we
like,
complained about that a
yeah,
bunch.
yeah, and I just think, like, when it comes down to it, is that it's a good thing we're not GMs. But two, like I think the cool thing about the Memphis Grizzlies is that they kind of give a vibe of like those old school Memphis Grizzlies teams. Oh, okay.
Grit and grind.
Padakin and a follow, on the Twitch. Okay,
Hey, there we go.
we haven't had a follow on Twitch in a minute, so I appreciate you, Padakin. But you know what I really like about this Memphis Grizzlies team, Pete, is that it kind of reminds me of those old school Memphis Grizzlies teams where. Actually, you know what? No, I would say it's a mixture between the old school Memphis Grizzlies teams with some of the veterans that they've added, and also a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of the.
Say
I
it.
would.
I
I'm
know
gonna
what you're
say it.
thinking.
The Oklahoma City Thunder from 2012. Like
Oh, that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking very similar, but a close time range. Warriors 2014, 2015.
I just think like the pieces are starting to come together. Like you're having Tyus Jones, who a lot of people kind of look off, but he's actually a really great backup guard, filling in for Ja Morant at this current moment. Like I
Yep.
love his game. I think a lot of guards who are new to, or not new, but a lot of guards who are like looking to like for guys to like look their model their game after. He's a guy I think you should be looking at, in terms of his game plan, his style. Brandon Clark. I know Sean's a little bit biased with him in terms of him being a Gonzaga player, now at in Memphis, but he's been a great player. Kind of just adding that kind of bench energy that they need. Obviously, Desmond Bain playing a lot more minutes. Averaging 18. If he's not most improved, I think it's, or we'll talk about it later, but he's definitely on that list for most improved at least as a candidate. And then you got Dylan
Yeah,
Brooks.
he's probably going to lose to his teammate. I mean, Ja's probably that's going to be the award I think Ja gets of all of them. Probably
Yeah.
most improved, and I think Desmond Bain should be like second in the voting. He's Desmond. That's the reason I say the 2014 Warriors. I think they're similar to that team, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that they all believe in each other. One and two, I like just like the style of players they have. I think is pretty comparable. Not like in their skill sets,
Yeah.
but the roles that they fit into. Like Ja's clearly like the Steph, right?
Yeah.
And especially with the 3-point shot he's developed this season and some of the
Mm-hmm.
long threes he's taken. And then I'm a huge believer in Desmond Bain. I think I might have even picked him to be most improved. I think we
Mm-hmm.
might need to go check the tape on that. And I couldn't have been more wrong, like right on that one. Not wrong. I was right on that one. Like Desmond Bain has got Klay Thompson energy in spades to me. He's an elite defender slash
Mm-hmm.
3-point shooter at every
Yeah.
facet. Anywhere on the court, you get that guy the ball. He's a threat, to shoot a three and make it. And then Jaren Jackson, man, I was a huge believer in this guy for years. Just couldn't stop getting injured, and he's got like that Draymond energy. He's got floor general vibes where he is kind of dictating the defensive schemes that they have out on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a dominant defensive force with that size. And really, when you stop and think about it, he's got more unicorn energy than Kristaps does now. Like the things that people were excited about in Kristaps' game, we're finally getting to see from Jaren Jackson Jr., who's been healthy this season. Like he's so long, he clogs up everything, but he can go out to the perimeter. He's
Mm-hmm.
like the fact that like Rudy Gobert won 3 defensive player of the years in a row, and then now we have this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, Rudy, no more. You have no more. Like, and that's not even counting other guys, like my guy Mobley. We have a ton of these dudes now. These big men who can kind of defensively get out towards the perimeter, stay on smaller guys.
Yep.
That is not something Rudy can do, and I think Jaren Jackson is the best at that in the whole league, honestly.
Yeah. Like I said, Jaren Jackson Jr. I'd never expected him to be kind of like this like unicorn, like you said, in terms of like to take it to the next level. You know what I mean? Like not like Embiid or like Jokic, but just a nice solid piece to kind of fill out with Ja Morant, who's kind of like your MVP of the team. And I know Sean, you're going to talk about how they're much better without Ja Morant, but man, it's I just think like you're missing it if you don't think that Ja Morant's important to this team. Like obviously this team, like you said, is 12 plus deep. Like I think everybody on this team can play. Like there's a lot of dudes on this team that can really give you minutes, can really do things for you. But I think Ja Morant to me is the MVP of this team. Uh, and I think, for Jaren Jackson Jr., it's finally good to see him healthy again and seeing what he can do for this team, because I
Yeah.
think that's what they were missing last year, was that kind of that dude that could kind of be like you said, a guy that can go out and defend a perimeter player instead of being a guy where they have to ice the ball screen. So have them reject the screen and having them to kind of uh have Jaren Jackson Jr. like way underneath the play and maybe give up threes. Maybe with
Exactly.
Steven Adams they have to do that, but with Jaren Jackson you can switch for a little bit. Not saying that he's gonna be the guy that like stops people all the time, but you can switch out for a little bit. Cover some ground. Almost kind of like I would say like a I'm trying to, but without like going too complicated on the defensive end stuff. But you can at least switch him, and he's not going to be screwed and left on an island by himself against some pretty good players. Obviously your Currys and many of those other guys, they can obviously do some damage, but for everybody else, Jaren Jackson Jr. has it covered.
And that's where you benefit from having a guy like Desmond Bain. Like Desmond Bain is probably the strongest guy on the court most
Mm-hmm.
nights. Like he's jacked, so he can guard bigger guys. He's kind of like Marcus Smart is definitely the best defensive small guard in the league in the sense that he can defend guys way bigger than him. Like, and he can just absolutely dominate defensively. Um, it's just more like you're saying, Jaren Jackson can switch all over the place. Desmond Bain can take the bigger guy for a second. They're just so long and
Mm-hmm.
so fast, and they all trust each other, and that's like the
Yeah.
biggest part of defense in the switching league that we're in right now. Like if you trust your guys to have your back when you miss somebody or
Mm-hmm.
somebody just gets around the outside, you get hard screened and you're stuck somewhere for like an extra half second, that solves a lot of problems. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. Just having faith in each other to cover that back line. So I love this Grizzlies team, and with Ja too, even the games he doesn't play, in his credit or to his credit, he is always the first one to congratulate somebody
Yep.
for having a 30-point night or a big play. He is the most excited guy on the court, which that is leadership at its finest. That's
Yeah.
huge leadership vibes. Like, and I hate to just dump on James Harden, but like think back to like the when he was with Houston, and I think it was the Clippers in 2015 when he sat on the bench while they made that huge comeback, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
had the towel on his head and he's just sitting there moping because he was terrible. Like, Ja is not doing that. Even if Ja
Mm-hmm.
has a bad night, he's not doing that. And that's what you need. That's team chemistry at its finest. Sean in the chat, I think Ja is really important for chemistry, but when I watch them play without him, they have better shot distribution, better defense, less turnovers, better ball movement, and shot selection. And honestly, they do because they don't have one focal point in the offense. Like
Mm-hmm.
problem and the only reason I would push back is that it is a star dominant league. So like having even if it
Yeah.
to the detriment of all those other things hurts a little bit, he makes up for it with the fact that he can give you 50. You know, you need that. And the defensive scheming that the other
Yeah.
team has to do just to even try and slow a guy as
Yeah.
physically dominant as Ja is, that's worth more than slightly better ball movement and less turnovers to me personally.
Yeah. I mean, I'll piggyback. I think, yeah, piggyback's the right word. I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just piggyback off that, because when you think about like the teams that they played, like you talked about, like they played New Orleans, they played New York, they played Oklahoma, they played Indiana. Like you can do those things against those type of teams, but then when you start playing, playoff teams, like you start playing, your Milwaukee's, your Golden States, and Phoenix when it's playoff time, that is when you need your star to come in and provide that
Yeah.
extra oomph that you don't have, right? Who's a guy like you talked about ball movement. You can get as much ball movement as you want. You can get the best shot selection you want. But if your team is not hitting those shots in those moments, you're screwed. You're screwed because like there's no one on the team that can just like go out and say, I need a bucket, get me a bucket. And that is where Ja Morant comes in for I would say the Memphis Grizzlies is a guy that you can have come in and give you those type of buckets. Whereas, a Desmond Bain, a great player, but he's not gonna be your focal point and a guy that you kind of build your offense around, or not even build your offense, but like if you need something to come down, like Desmond Bain, like he's a great player and I think he's a great secondary guy, but I just don't think he's a great guy to like, you know, get you that last second bucket that you need. Whereas I feel like Ja Morant can do that in any shape or form, and whether it's shooting or whether it's passing the ball, you just need that type of opportunity from your star players. And so, that's the reason, like you said, Pete, it's a star-driven league, and that's why like the teams that usually win a championship, besides I would say that 2004 Pistons team, like that's the only team in like the last, I would say, decade, 2 decades, whatever you want to call it. Like that's we haven't seen that type of
Yeah.
basketball win in a very long time.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, we probably won't again. Like I think there's too much talent not to have like a team with at least one megastar win the
Hmm.
championship, you know.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would push back and agree with Sean is like I do think people sleep on the other players on the Grizzlies way too much. Like
Hmm.
way too much.
Nope. I think we lost you. Let me double check. 1 second.
Oh, can you hear me again?
Yeah, yeah. Now I can hear you. You're
All
good now.
right, sorry, this mic cord is so loose. That being said, what I was saying is just like I think Ja just gets way too much credit for this Grizzlies team. And that's not disagreeing with you or agreeing with Sean completely. I just think like this team at large, there's so many better players on this team that they get credit for.
Hmm.
Like Desmond Bain, and you kind of just did it, rightfully so, because this is who he is right now. He is like a great second or third fiddle on a team, right? This is a guy like genuinely, I think Desmond Bain could be like a 25 a night player. I really
Wow.
do.
You think
He's
so?
that
Okay.
I genuinely think so. I think he has got like unlimited offensive skills. Like he's really maybe not unlimited. That might be a little too bold, but he is a much better offensive player than I think people give credit for. If you look at that Grizzlies game log that you have pulled up, I don't know if it's still pulled up. I'm a little delayed, but he's their leading scorer like more than any other player not named Ja Morant. And if you look closely, they win every game that he's their leading scorer too. Like he's a great efficient scorer, and I think that is something that needs to get more credit. And one other thing too, Bernie, and we need to just give ourselves a little grief for this. Like we really hated the Steven Adams trade before the season,
I will
and
definitely agree with that.
we were very down on it because Valanciunas has skills that Steven Adams has never had. He can shoot threes. He's a better scorer all around. He's probably I mean, he's very comparable defensive player for the most part. The one thing that I think we just overlooked completely is how much of a chemistry guy Steven Adams is.
Hmm.
Like Steven Adams is right there if any of the guys on his team need him, night in and night out. And the other thing we didn't give enough credit to is if they had Jaren Jackson, how little they needed a guy like Valanciunas. They needed a guy more like Steven Adams than Valanciunas because of what Jaren Jackson provides them. Like you don't
Yeah.
necessarily need two 3-point shooting 7 foot tall guys on the court, even though it wouldn't hurt. You don't need it, especially when all your
Hmm.
other guys can shoot the way the Grizzlies can. So
Yeah.
I love this Grizzlies team. I wish they got more credit as a unit than they do. So in that sense, I agree with Sean. But yeah, Ja's incredible. I agree with you, Justin. He's so much fun to watch. Maybe I would say besides Giannis, I think Ja's probably the most fun player to watch in the league right now.
Yeah. It used to be like Russell Westbrook was kind of that fun player to watch.
Never for me.
But times have changed. Times have definitely changed on that. I didn't like Bane. I didn't like the Bane draft pick, and I was dead wrong. I'll admit that he's a beast.
I was
Good.
so bummed he got drafted. Like I think what was he, the 15th pick? I might
30th.
be misremembering. He was the 30th?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Why'd I get that so wrong? Regardless, it way too late. I like Desmond Bain coming into the draft a lot. I thought he was like the best spot up shooter in the whole draft that year. And physically you could see he was going to grow into a man's man in the league. You know, he's
Hmm.
not going to get bullied like a lot of perimeter players do.
Yeah. But let us know in the comment section down below, everybody. What do you guys make of this Memphis Grizzlies team? I know we went from an MVP discussion to talking about the Grizzlies, but just had to be mentioned about the Grizzlies and kind of the job that they've done this season. So let us know in the comment section down below. What is your prediction for the Memphis Grizzlies? Are you seeing them as a finals contender, a playoff contender, or just happy to be in the playoffs? Let me know in the comment section down below. What is your opinion on the Memphis Grizzlies?